The Last of Us Part 2's No Return mode is out. This is a roguelike mode that allows you to play as some of the characters from the story and fight your way through randomized encounters, ultimately culminating in a boss battle. The mode has some things that really make it shine and really make it great. It also does have some negative things as well, but ultimately when I really think about it, this mode mostly just makes me sad when I play it. Dr. Pooplove here, and let's get right into it. No Return is a roguelike mode based on the mechanics of The Last of Us Part 2. You pick 1 out of 10 available characters, 5 from the Ellie faction and 5 from the Abby faction. Each character has their own unique traits, and you need to fight your way through 6 randomized encounters against 1 out of 4 enemy types, with various objectives and various modifiers that ultimately give you a very different experience for every run. In between matches, you can gear up and you can chart your course to ultimately reach the last stage, which is a final boss. And I would say the mode itself, it's got some good and it's got some bad. So the good is, well, it's an engaging package. If you enjoy the combat of The Last of Us, this is a great way to get your fill in a replayable format. The different traits and the various ways you can upgrade your character and choose your branching paths allows for some serious strategy, which I love with third-person shooters. And the randomization of it all means that you have to strategize differently every time. The mode also manages to capture the tension of the main game, which makes victories very satisfying, but makes you rage really hard when you fail, and makes you reflect on the missteps that you took. It's simple. It's essentially built off the encounters mode that was in The Last of Us Part 2, but that is not necessarily a bad thing, as the core combat is great and it's allowed to shine without too much complexity getting in the way. I think the daily run element is really cool, as it allows you to have some sort of competition. And I do see myself playing this game for a little while. And actually, one of my main pluses is actually standing in stark contrast to what a lot of the main criticism that I've seen about this mode has been. Some journalists especially are complaining that the arcadey celebration of violence goes against the tone of the story. And to that, I say, shut the fuck up. This is a video game. We should be allowed to have fun, and it annoys me to hear these types of critiques. Especially, I feel like these journalists kind of get into Naughty Dog's ear and they misguide them towards chasing review scores rather than fan enjoyment and satisfaction. The mode is just pure fun, and I think that's kind of a breath of fresh air. It's been a while since we've seen Naughty Dog focus on that, just pure fun. I think it's something that makes this mode shine, and it's not a hindrance to the game. But it's not all perfect. So there is some bad, which I want to highlight. For one, some of the modifiers aren't really that fun to play. Some of the photo mode filter modifiers, for instance, just kind of hurt my eyes. And the mirror mode is more just an annoyance than anything else. And invisible enemies is just a bridge too far in terms of difficulty. Actually, it's fucking ridiculous. I'm not a fan of that at all. And there are other modifiers that are kind of cool. Like there's one where you get a boost of speed after vaulting, which is cool, but it doesn't really seem to make a huge impact on gameplay. So some of these I'd feel like they're just there to have something. Also, one thing is, as you load into an encounter, well, it seems like there are loading screens, and I don't really think it's acceptable to have this for a PS5 game. Another thing that just kind of annoys me is some of the character traits, like Joel can't dodge, which I feel is less about trying to differentiate his abilities and more about trying to justify their explanation of why Joel couldn't dodge in The Last of Us Part 1 remake. And ironically, he is more resistant to melee, but I guess that just doesn't include golf clubs. And the characters themselves, they're mostly just skins on top of Ellie and Abby's character models. Joel especially feels weird as you watch him moving around. We are very familiar with his movement style, so it just is pretty jarring how much he just moves like Ellie. But I don't really expect them to really tailor model to each character with how little time and resources I do think got put into this. Also, the unlockables, the customizations are kind of leaving some to be desired, and I can see this mode getting old, and I can see my interest in it falling off. And another major critique I have is, well, there's a missed opportunity here for co-op to have been a part of this. Allowing 2 players to play together definitely could have worked with this mode. You even have an objective mode where you and another player are fighting against infected. I know adding that ability to team up and queue up is, a little extra work, but I think it would have been worth it. All in all, though, I do think it's a nice, welcome addition. It's not perfect, but it is fun. But what really makes me sad and what bothers me the most, of course, is this isn't Factions. As I play this mode, I can't help but be constantly reminded of what Factions could have been. Now, mind you, this mode is not, like some have continued to suggest, a scrapped version of Factions 2. This is clearly a modified version of the encounters that was already present in The Last of Us Part 2. But if anything, there might be some shared elements. Like maybe some of these modes were initially part of a co-op, and maybe some of these assets like the ammo boxes were part of the multiplayer. But the multiplayer team didn't actually work on this mode. And it does at some level also make me sad that we aren't going to be able to see the fruits of their labor. So in some ways this mode is the closest thing we do have to Factions 2, but yet it is so far away from it. Of course, there's no PvP here, and there's no co-op, and any ways for us to really experience the world of The Last of Us together, besides looking at the leaderboard. While I do have fun playing this, as I play, I get equally bummed out and wondering why there wasn't any attempt to offer any sort of PvP here in this package. The timing of this release is actually pretty bad. They put this game out right after canceling Factions, which really muted the enthusiasm of perhaps the biggest part of the Naughty Dog fan base that would have turned up for this mode. I was mostly excited for No Return to the extent that it could hold me over for the long Factions 2 wait, but once Factions 2 got canceled, my hype for this mode just got really low. And while I'm having fun, I get sad as I play this thing. And I know that I'm not going to really be playing this as long as I was playing the original Factions. The other thing weird here is there was this free shadow drop release of God of War Valhalla, which totally undercut this mode, especially since Valhalla was free and having story impact. No Return is much more my speed, much more something that appeals to me, but it definitely feels like they got a little bit showed up there, and I don't know why Sony is allowed for that scheduling to happen. I mean, with The Last of Us Season 2 not coming out until 2025, the timing of this release just feels weird. And so I feel like they had an opportunity here to actually internally delay this release and maybe take some time and add some of the multiplayer that they had been working on, or at least co-op as a mode to this entry. I think that would have allowed for more enthusiasm, at least from that Factions fan base, because this mode in and of itself isn't really getting me through my disappointment from all that. Perhaps the plan is to add that stuff into The Last of Us Part 3, but I'm not certain of that, and that's many years away, I think. Despite all this, I am slightly encouraged that this new mode and its overall positive reception can serve as a signal to Naughty Dog not to totally abandon this fun part of their heritage. I know they are seen today as these serious storytellers who seek to create immersive experiences, but I fell in love with Naughty Dog for the fun gameplay and the modes and the games that weren't always trying to sit above the fray. Crash Team Racing is my all-time favorite childhood game. Of course, the Uncharted multiplayer were fun, frenetic, and not serious arcade modes in the Uncharted universe. And Factions has gripped me more than any game really has. The story of all those modes and games didn't matter, and that made me a fan. This roguelike mode to me is the latest example of that part of Naughty Dog that we don't see as much. That part that doesn't take itself too seriously and just wants to make something fun and enjoyable. The hope is that this sends a signal that we want these types of experiences to accompany their single player games. Perhaps this would justify to them that bringing the multiplayer they had worked on into The Last of Us 3 is worth it. But it could also be a signal to them that No Return 2 is all they need to strive for with The Last of Us Part 3. And that would be a total bummer, but a reality I can see. These days I don't have a ton of faith in Naughty Dog like I used to. I can't just give them the benefit of the doubt here. It does feel like they do care more about the awards, the review scores, the prestige, and they're willing to lose some of their fan base in that aim. It doesn't help that they do have a very crazy, toxic part of the fan base who will criticize everything they do. And that part really bothers me because any legitimate criticism, like how they handled this whole faction situation, is kind of allowed to fall through the cracks and just be written off by many as just more toxicity. And it does get me mad that Factions fans' disappointment with the cancellation often oftentimes gets painted as toxic behavior. No, Naughty Dog fucked up. So look, it's a wait and see approach for me. I have said my piece on the situation, and so it's kind of time to move on. When we have something new ready, we'll take a look at it and we'll see what has become of this studio. In the meantime, this roguelike mode is fun. It's not everything I wanted from an arcadey Last of Us mode, but it's fun and worth it to play for me. Definitely won't hold me over as long as Factions, but it has my attention for now. I'll put some time into making some tip videos for this type of videos I was hoping to make for Factions too when I started this channel. And then I will keep moving on and exploring new studios. But in the meantime, I do have some tip videos regarding The Last of Us that I think would actually help with this no return mode. So you should check it out. And I want to say a special thank you to my YouTube members for supporting the Bowel Movement. It means a lot to me. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.